Welcome back to 33 Conversations Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Abney, and today I'm joined by Vivian, the founder of The Inner Room. Vivian, welcome to the pod. How are you doing today?
Doing well, Michael. How are you?
Doing good. Got some storms going through right now as we're recording, so if somebody hears some background rain vibes, that's not me, that's nature going on, so I just wanted to put that out there. But welcome. I'm so happy that you are joining me today. We've got a really powerful conversation ahead of us. But I want to share something that stood out to me in our first conversation. And it was that tension between you and what you were told that you should be and what you actually wanted. And that through line between identity, immigrant parents, social work, your love for social work and entrepreneurship, smeared in with a little self-doubt, all of that converging into what you're creating now in the inner room. This is not just your business you're building an internal space. And that's why I was so excited to have you come on the podcast today to have that conversation. And we start all of our conversations by asking our guests, what transformation are you currently in the middle of right now?
Yeah, I think you actually put it beautifully. And the transformation that I'm finding myself in is still continuing to shed some of those old beliefs so that I can actually reveal parts of myself authentically. And that's what we actually do at Inner Room, right? We want to help clients to really discover themselves and find that authentic piece. And it's actually so interesting, Michael, as you're saying, right now there's a storm coming through. But I think that's kind of the experience. Sometimes we have to let the storm come through and sort of wash away some of the things that maybe aren't serving us anymore. And although in that moment it can feel like very intense, it can feel like a lot, I think once the storm comes through, there's so much richness for things to grow and for things to kind of spring up. So I'm really excited to, talk to you today about this and also
Yeah, me
just see,
too.
yeah.
It's because I love having conversations where I actually am in the middle of it too. I just, I hesitated when I first started doing the podcast. Should I, like, how much should you share or, but like, I don't care anymore. I'm like 102 in. It is what it is. If I've never been very much into like astrology or especially Chinese astrology, but my God, like I was born in the year of the fire horse.
Mm.
And was not aware of that till just a couple of months ago. And here it is again. But this last year of shedding the snake in the last month has been probably one of the most intense moments of shedding that I have ever experienced in my 60 years on the planet. And also understanding that, it's a great honor to still be alive. Not very many people make it that long, but really getting to that root and noticing what was needed to come off of me and allowing that to happen at the same time, not flinching. And I'm curious, what have you noticed as you've been going through this? Like, what has been falling away, no longer serving you, as a way to kick this off?
Yeah. So, a big part of sort of what I knew as stability or safety growing up was around this idea of like, you need to have this particular job, you need to be this particular person, right? I think somewhere we all probably have some narrative of like, by 25, you want to get married, you want to settle down, you want to have kids, you want to have a house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these are the different professions you're allowed to be in, right? Whenever I talk to like folks, they always tell me, like, there's this arbitrary number of 25 as to when you're expected to kind of like know everything. And funny enough, I'm like 25, I don't think I knew anything, right? Knowing what I know now. And so I think, yeah, it's just being able to kind of shut away some of those older stories, whether it's from society or whether they're like culturally linked, to be able to just take a moment to discover where you want to be. That timeline doesn't actually work the same for everyone, right? And I think that's not something they teach you in school. They're just like, everybody do this, do it now. And parents are very much like, we want to keep you safe, so make sure you follow this path because this is like the path of safety. But then the safest place is actually when you figure out who you are and you follow that truly. Because that's where I think once you shed those pieces and once you're able to kind of go through the storm, there's something really lovely on the other side.
You mentioned like that life you were supposed to have.
Yeah.
When we talked before, you were sharing that with me, and this, you didn't see where you're at right now as part of your path. What was the original path that you were on, and and what changed that shifted you over into building out the inner room?
Yeah. So my parents, my whole family, is a family of engineers. So my sister's also an engineer. They all really love numbers and math. And I just found for myself like I couldn't be in that. So then my parents were like, well, if you're not going to be an engineer, you have the options of being a lawyer or you have the options of being like in medicine. You can practice anything in medicine. Go for that. And so I'm
That
sort
was
of
it.
thinking, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
It's like there's no other jobs in the world but that. So I was thinking, okay, so what am I supposed to be doing now? Right. And I did okay with numbers and math. I like never really got into that kind of problem solving, but I really loved having conversations. And I really love trying to figure out sort of like how the human brain works and all the things around our psychology and our psyche. And from there, I kind of got into university thinking, hey, if I take all of these courses, in this degree, it's still pretty similar to being a pre-med. Let's just say after I took organic chemistry and physics, I was pretty determined I was probably not going to write the MCAT and be pre-med. And then from there, I sort of thought about what is potentially something that can have impact in the world. And I thought maybe I can like go be a lawyer because in terms of where I want to be is to help support families and help support children. It really kind of plays a big piece in terms of my own upbringing and wanting to provide a different space for
Yeah.
those individuals. Let's just say I took my LSAT. And then when I was about to go to law school, I actually ended up serendipitously in a research project around sort of understanding our cultural identity. And so I was like, this is an interesting research project. The researcher, she is a social worker. And so she told me, hey, by the way, like there's this profession called social work. So in China, social work doesn't really translate the same way that we expect it to in sort of like the Western world. In kind of China, what you would get is more of like a society worker. So that's someone who is probably like more of a philanthropist in English terms, right? So the idea of social work wasn't something I was familiar with. And this researcher was basically looking at our identities in terms of how it's reflected. So it's for first and second generation Chinese individuals who are coming in to share a little bit about how their identity, their cultural identity shows up in different settings. And it was so interesting because then she actually found that for most folks, you're more on a spectrum in terms of your identity, right? So if I'm at home, more likely than not, I will be more of like my Chinese self, quote unquote, right? Versus like if I'm more at work, depending on the work setting, I might present as more Western, right? Or Canadian. So I think some of those pieces were really interesting, the way she sort of looked at the fabric of identity from a cultural lens. And then I was like, okay, well, what can you do as a social worker outside of research? And from there, I ended up doing my master's in social work, really fell in love with the profession because it's not just about looking at the individual, but really understanding that integrated piece around sort of the society at large, the cultural context, maybe world events. And it's like
Yeah.
that very fine network of not just thinking about you as yourself, but it really embracing and understanding all these other factors that have an impact on you.
Yeah, like the impact of your family. Don't know. I never asked you, but I sense you had a really strong or have a really strong relationship with your family, like respectful. It's just the energy that I get from you.
Yeah.
How did your, and I know girls and dads have this really special bond and, all of that conversation, 30,000 feet, they want you to succeed and be the best and not have to worry, like that's their job. But how did your dad's experience shape your relationship to business in general?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when my dad first came to Canada, he worked in different restaurants. So as an engineer working in a restaurant, there's something about that chemistry, I guess, that you really
Yeah.
translate over as a skill. But I think he really wanted to go back to some version of being able to engage in that engineering piece around making things and producing things. I don't think he ever got there, but he did become an entrepreneur. So he actually
Okay.
ended up doing like electrical work and contracting work. It was somewhat, I guess, the practical version of engineering to him. And so through that, for me personally, seeing that and seeing the struggles he had to go through, I think at first I was like pretty resistant to any kind of entrepreneurship because I had the story that when you're an entrepreneur, you have to struggle, you have to work really, really hard. You have to do everything. You're always on 24/7. There's no rest. You just got to go, 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 go. And
Yeah.
that didn't seem
Wow.
appealing to me. So,
It
yeah,
doesn't like on the face of it, right? But like as you're
right.
saying that, my dad was an entrepreneur too, but he had the jobs, he was also an engineer and he had, the main jobs, but the things that he loved, it was all entrepreneurial and like side hustles back when it wasn't even called side hustles, but there were
Yeah.
just things that he loved. He loved cars. So I was like, and I'm in this process right now where I'm looking at, I tear myself apart all the time, looking at the stories that I have that are in the background about all of these conversations like we're having right now. So I'm curious about your story about your identity and the community slash experiences and like what does that mean to you now? Like what's the story that you're writing now based off of the one that you were given?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about the story that I was given, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the story that I'm writing now. We can kind of like compare and
Yeah, because this is like
contrast.
right in this space. Like I'm on this 30-day audit, and so today's the last couple of days have been about the story, and I'm finding it so powerful because it's not the thing; it's the story that we tell ourselves, and then the internal story about how it's going. So that's literally like I'm on day 5 today, and that's literally well, yeah. So let's go
Yeah, that's
because I
amazing.
think it's so powerful.
It is. And I think story really has such a big impact in terms of like how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we see others. And so the story I was given was that you're a girl. So even if you needed to kind of work, please do the job. That doesn't like, you can be in these professions, but you do not have to work that hard. Your main task is to get married. Right. So that was the story I was given. And then also parts of the stories that I started to tell myself was also like, don't go into entrepreneurship. It's hard. It's too much of a struggle. You're not going to make it because a part of it is, you're already a girl. So why would you do that? And that was like so unfortunate to hold on to because I think as I'm going through this part of my own journey and learning more about myself, I think I'm getting to paint that different picture of actually these things that make you who you are the gifts that the world might need, right? This
Yeah,
inner room that we talk about, we struggle so much listening to stories that others give us that we don't take an opportunity to really kind of like pull through the thread and say, which of pieces do I actually want to weave into my life now?
yeah,
Right. So I think a part of this is being told those stories was also sort of like the fire in my belly to be like, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. I don't care what you say. I'm a girl and I'm going to do the complete opposite. You're going to tell me I have to do this. I'm definitely not doing that. I'm going the other way. Right. So I think in one way, it was actually extremely motivating. But then the other piece to it, too, was that I think some of that fire used to kind of drive me in a way that I thought, like, this is about, what I want. But then you start to feel that fatigue and you start to feel that
it breaks
fire start
down.
to wane. And
Yeah,
then you're starting to think about like, well, what is going to make this sustainable? And I
yeah,
think that's where I actually started to kind of recognize who I was. And I was able to almost merge a bit of those stories where it's like it's not just about rebelling against the story I don't want, but
hmm,
then taking apart those threads and saying, actually, these are pieces that I would really love. Right? There's something
yeah,
that actually is really lovely about entrepreneurship. There's so much freedom, there's so much flexibility. You actually get to operate according to your mission and values. And I think
yeah,
that is just like
yeah,
so lovely versus had I just listened to previous messages and just went, I'm going to go gun ho just into the biz because you tell me I can't. I don't think I would have discovered some of those pieces. And that's more the fuel that continues to drive in terms of this work that I do.
When I first started, that was how I did everything. I needed somebody to tell me no. At the beginning, it was easy. Everybody told me no. So it was like, oh, I'll show you. And I did. It was like effortless. And then as life went on, I had to almost create, I didn't realize that at the time, but I almost had to create scenarios to force people to tell me no, because that's the only way that I knew that it worked. But that broke down. I got really tired in my mid 30s. And then it was on to like the other part of just the journey of working and doing everything I did. But now that I'm in this stage of my life where I want to serve and I want to recreate myself in a different way, I'm finding the level of access to it is at a very deeper level. And the things where I used to, all the doubts, I manage them. I created coping mechanisms for them, but they don't even work anymore. Have you had that experience yet? Because, you're in a different timeline than me. You're much younger than me, but I'm curious, do you still have self-doubt? Does it come up? If so, like, what's the thing that screams at you the most? Like, for me, it's like taking care of myself, being able to make it on my own. That is always like at a root gut level. Yeah. What is it for you?
Yeah, I think in terms of the self doubt, it is when all of those stories sort of like rear their heads at the same time, right? I think sometimes the stories might come up if, let's say, I haven't really taken care of myself. So, what I think about is like, have I slept? Right. Am I making sure that I ate something that's pretty nutritious? Am I making sure that I actually step away from the desk, right? To be able to like have some movement in my body? Am I making sure that I'm resting when my body says I'm a bit too tired? Right. I think like if you were talking to me maybe even like 5 years ago, me being sick, I would have just continued to push through it really, really hard. I know I'm a bit congested right now, but I would say my improvement is I actually took off some sick days. Right? Whereas
Okay.
previously, I used to go, ooh, I'm doing this calculation of like, if I take a sick day, this is the money I'm going to lose. And if I lose that money, then how am I going to survive? And it spirals into this whole story about failing just because of a sick day.
Yes.
And
Like,
so,
totally
yeah,
made up, but yet so real. Can you
it's
think
so,
of
so,
like a failure that shaped to success? Like a
mhm.
failure that you had that turned into be like a success story for you.
Yeah. I think in terms of failing, the one thing about failing is that I don't see failure and success as being complete opposites of each other. Right. What
Okay.
I sort of see is failure is the ingredient to drive success. Because if we don't fail, we won't know how to build that success.
Okay.
So, what I mean by that is in this quote unquote failure, you're actually taking opportunities to really experiment and learn from some of those very delicate lessons that have to be experienced. Right. I sort of think of it
That's
when I like talk to clients. I think the gym might be a really common thing my clients talk about. We're
yes.
still in the midst of February, so
Yes.
everybody's still on the new year, new me, I'm going to go work out kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's like figuring out how do you even position your body and really being so mind body centered that you can feel the movement that you're about to engage in, right? I used to have a trainer and she used to say, brace your core. And for the longest time, I was like, brace what core? What are you talking about? And then I would come home and be like, oh, my back kind of hurts a little, right?
Because
So
your
it's like
core was it. Yeah.
something you have to start to learn that for yourself and the
Yeah.
breath in terms of that work, right? So I think learning that, really kind of understanding that when we know that experience, take the lessons because the lessons are going to build the success that you're looking for, right? So they complement each other, I would say. They're not opposite of each other.
Yeah.
And so
That's how I
that's my
look at
thought. Yeah.
breakdowns, or breakthroughs is that same way. You cannot have one unless you have a breakdown. Like you have to make room for it. And like, so that I'm glad you said that because that like a light bulb went off for me about that. And also too, the element of what you said about being experimental. I think I'm so serious sometimes about it. Like I put so much at stake in my mind and my story that about it that it sometimes prevents me from the ability to experiment. And just through the failing of it so many times, I've now started to really get that I can experiment before the fail hits or whatever I think a fail is. So thank you for bringing that up. Like, how does that play? Do you use that energy of experimenting with, because you learn life one way, and then
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, the story you had about it being struggle and hard, what did you have to unlearn about yourself or that story to be where you're at now, like living the entrepreneur founder role with what you're creating with the inner room?
Yeah. I think what I've sort of learned is still kind of complementing both, right? So when I think about entrepreneurship, it doesn't have to be a struggle and it doesn't have to be hard. However, it does have to be consistent, right? And to make sure that I'm consistent, I need to make sure that I have my accountability buddies. So,
Hmm.
all of those folks in my community, we grow together, we share different resources to help each other grow our business. And we're there to kind of talk through and walk through some of those different stages. We're all at different kinds of parts of our own journey when it comes to sort of where each of our practices are. However, we give each other some thoughts, some advice, and that continues to pull us through each day. Right. I would say probably like the first year of really trying to get this going was the hardest, but I've just been so fortunate to have such a wonderful team. And they're also the glue to kind of help continue to prompt this desire to move forward with our group practice. And so those are some of the pieces where, like, also sometimes when the self doubt comes in and the stories want to kind of play fight with each other, I sort of think of it like if you were in kind of a meeting room and you are acting as your own CEO, right? You're likely not going to just shut down opinions because your staff have wonderful thoughts. So I listen to both stories and then I take a pause, I take that away, and then I see what I kind of want to decide with, right? It might be that I'm taking a much riskier move than what I'm used to. However, there's something there about being willing to take the risk. So the stories don't go away. I think they just learn to play better with each other in a sense.
That reminds me of something else that we were talking about before too that was really powerful. Your take, and I want you to share about this too, your take on the power of listening as a founder, as a creator, being more powerful than like talking and commanding and leading. It was sort of reversed. Could you share a little bit about like that insight or your perspective on that? I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of the profession of being a psychotherapist and being a social worker is that we get this lovely practice of listening. And when I think about conversations, a good conversation is probably about 40% talking and 60% listening. And why I say this is because in a good conversation, when we're communicating with each other, we're trying to get a particular message across.
Yeah.
If we don't listen, we don't know what that message is. And if we talk over, we're sharing our message, but then that conversation won't be aligned because we're not listening.
Yeah.
And I think being able to really practice and hone in on the skill of listening not only helps build strong foundations for relationships, I've also been able to get so much from my team as well by being able to listen to sort of what their thoughts are and the direction in terms of where we would all like to go as a group.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important as well for us at Inner Room because we practice listening to our clients. We put this all together. We figure out ways to better serve our clients because we're able to listen.
It's and what you said about practice. It is a practice. It's not like a switch that just comes on. I started community is my context for everything that I'm doing and building it here with the conversations with 33 strangers. It's all community. Took me a while to see it. It wasn't until I started building community here in St. Louis and creating spaces for people to connect. I had his name's Jeremy Marr. His podcast comes out today, and he created this called the Philosophy Club. He's also in Canada, and it's just really an awesome experience that you get to go and you get to listen to people's ideas about certain topics every week without interrupting them, without interjecting. I think it's about listening. So when you're talking, it reminded me of I started a chapter here. Last night was the founding night of it. And we had 6 people that showed up and it was so awesome that I never met them before. And it was just really, I read the rules and we just went and it was just the most amazing conversation to witness. And the topic was dating in 2026. So it was just so cool. I learned so much. And at the end, everybody was like, well, why didn't you share? And I was like, I'm here to facilitate and I'll interject, if I need to move the conversation. But like, I really just so enjoyed just listening to you. And there were some times I did want to interject, but I caught myself like, no, listen. So it's really powerful to do that and create scenarios where we can learn to like trust that listening is okay. I think it must come out of some sort of sense of survival or training or something, but it was really magical. I felt so awesome when I left that space last night.
Definitely. In terms of our practice, I think on the key of listening, right? For a lot of
Yeah.
folks, when it comes to listening, it's not something that they've been able to experience. I think there's a lot of, I'm telling you what to do, don't misunderstand me, a lot of authority over our lives that we continue to grow with those narratives and those stories and we carry it forward. That then we also don't practice listening to ourselves. And so at Inner Room, when we think about this idea of community and connection, it's really living in a way that's authentic to you. And so you need to actually start by listening to yourself. You need to kind of take that pause to slow things down, to really be able to hear what's going on. And sometimes the messages are going to be really confusing. You might not even know what they need, right?
Yeah.
But before we put judgment on them, just taking that moment to just hear what comes up.
So that was my experience last night. And when we talked about what you were creating with the inner room, you were allowing that space to happen inside of people. So that's what went off in my mind when you were just talking. So like how does that show up when you're in practice with that inside, your intention for what you're creating is for us to have that space. How does that practically play out? And what is your experience of that when you're creating it? It's not like I've never heard anybody talk about it that way because it's psychotherapy to me is like fixing something, or that's how I have it in my mind. And that was why I wanted you on the podcast so much is your passion for your explaining this space that you were creating was for people to hear and connect with their inner space. So how's that blossoming?
Yeah. I think for a lot of clients, they do come in going like, I want this fixed.
Yeah. Okay.
And I
Yeah.
would say like the quickest way for us to fix it is really being able to diagnose what the problem is. And the problem is we're working against something that's not natural for us, right? Imagine if like you had a sore muscle and instead of listening to your body going, ooh, that muscle probably doesn't feel so great, you continue working out on it. You could probably still get like a, pretty good pump, but for how long? Right? And what kind of issues are you going to have to deal with moving forward? So I think now we're also in a culture of health, of really making sure that we listen to our bodies, really integrating that knowledge. And a big part of what clients start to see pretty quickly is when they listen to themselves, they actually can relate to the people in their life in a much easier way. Because when you have clarity about yourself, you're able to engage in the world in a way that actually makes sense and reflects who you are. And so, what I often hear from a lot of folks now is, oh, I have so much social anxiety. What are they going to think? Which is such a natural thing, right? Gabor Mate talks about this idea of us having two core needs as humans, one being authenticity, and the other being community, connection, the need to belong. And so, the best spot is when we can have both, right?
Okay. I'm on that
But
train.
yeah,
I'm on that
I
train.
I think people just get like so scared of taking that risk because they're like, ooh, there's been moments where I've shown myself and that I've been rejected. And I'm just so scared to feel that rejection. And I think that still plays into my idea of like why I don't think success and failure are different either. You
That
need
makes
to be
sense.
rejected. That pain is more to tell us, by the way, that didn't really connect. And that's okay, right? If it doesn't connect, that doesn't mean it's something wrong. We might be curious, we might notice it, we might make sense of, what was going on there, right? But if it didn't connect, probably because we're not swimming in the right pool, right? I would never put a tiny little feeder fish into the ocean. That just seems like an unfortunate environment for them. But if they were sort of in this like lovely little pond or even in a fishbowl, then maybe they're sort of living that life that makes more sense. And so when we have that clarity for ourselves, then we have the autonomy and the accountability to start to create that environment, to start to create those community and networks, to start to show ourselves in that way, which will actually resonate and pull in the people that are actually for you. A lot of clients are like, but what is that like? For Inner Room, we've been operating for about 2 years. We're going,
Is it for you as you're starting to swim into a larger pool, more confidence? Like, who are you becoming now that you're starting to settle into this and what you
yeah.
created?
I think the more that I learn, the less that I know. And I'm actually loving that now. Because
Okay.
previous to it, I think we come into new experiences because I had actually come into Inner Room having already practiced for about 10 years solo on my own as a psychotherapist, that I was sort of like, ooh, okay, so I have to like know how to do this. I'd have to know how to run a group practice because I already know how to run my own psychotherapy practice. So, obviously it'll be the same. It'll just be like bigger. But when you're scaling, it's actually so different. It's different because then all those old stories will come up. You'll have to wrestle with it. You'll have to rethread the parts that you want to carry forward and then learn the other pieces that you might have to kind of shed away and leave behind. And so being group practice is actually quite different than being a solo practitioner. And I think being group practice, we're not just taking care of our own interests anymore or just connecting with the clients that we feel like we resonate with most. Being group practice means that we also connect with each other as a group, as a team, and figure out what actually resonates for all of us. Where are our similarities? And then also where are our gifts? And I think a part of that, once we discover it, has been really eye opening because each of us are so similar. I would say, like,
Yeah.
for, my team
Yeah.
members, we all have this core that's quite the same, right? And then we have these lovely parts of ourselves that wrap around that core that give such a unique experience to each of the clients we connect with. And so I think it's being able to kind of hold on to that core in our team and listening to each other and fostering that and listening to our clients and then using that to kind of reflect back.
For somebody listening who feels caught between the expectations that they were given as they were growing up and that authenticity that they know is inside of them, what would you say to them about building a life that actually feels like their own, not the one that was sort of passed down to them?
I would say start with finding a way to center yourself. Be willing to pause, be willing to sit with that discomfort, be willing to take whatever messages come up. And also during that journey, connect with the people that you really trust. I would say I couldn't have gotten through this without some of my closest friends, some of my colleagues,
Yeah.
my family, because when I sort of built that trust in them, the points where I was wavering, that I was really unsure of who I am, they were able to reflect that back to me and say, by the way, like, we know this is who you are. And then I could kind of take that and say, does it still make sense? Is it still who I am? Do I want to carry this forward? And as I asked those questions, it really helped me get to where I am. Right. So if you're feeling it, if you're in the middle of the storm, right, I say enjoy it. Unless if it's like lightning and stuff, you probably don't want to throw
Or
away your
tornado get in your
umbrella
basement.
or, yeah. If that is the case, then safety first. It makes a lot of sense, right? But if you're in the middle and it's just raining, enjoy the rain, put your toes into the mud, let everything kind of sink in,
Yeah.
allow for yourself to actually like embrace any kind of joy you experience in the moment. Because joy, as Brene Brown says, is one of the emotions that we only have a glimmer of. Because once we have it, we're so scared of losing it that we're really, really trying to grasp it and hold on to it. But it's one of those emotions that when you're in the moment, just embrace
Be with
it.
it. Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. You have such a you're so calming. Like, so yeah, I can imagine being in your practice and like, yeah, you're total alignment with what you're doing and I love it. Thank you so much for modeling what it looks like to build identity rather than giving into the pressure to conform, which is always present, I think, for most of us. Even though they wanted us to survive, there's something about it's got to break out. And thank you for being an example of that. And 33 Conversations is here to explore the humans like you behind your missions. And thank you for the courage it took to integrate what you did and what you're building. So I appreciate that. I just have to say that trust does, for me, it starts with us, it's inside of us. And when we get to know ourselves more authentically, and then from there, it just begins to ripple out. So if you're listening to this, go out and make some ripples today, and we will see you on the next one.